All right, how you guys doing? It's been a while since I recorded a podcast episode. Actually, I recorded an episode last week, but I did not post it. And the reason why was because I was in a bad mood when I recorded the episode. I think it was like right after I posted my most recent video on my TikTok channel. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, please do. That episode or that TikTok video, I should say, is called "All Is AI." In that video, I posited that perhaps we are the artificial superintelligence, right? The collective consciousness of the human race is the artificial superintelligence of an alien species. An alien, I put in quotes just to mean like, unfamiliar, right? Outside of this reality. So we already know that we're, more or less in a simulation. I mean, quote, no, right? But that's the general consensus. Can't necessarily, prove it all the way, but that's where, our physics is leading us to. Right. And some people have felt, and myself as well, I theorized in the past that, okay, this is essentially like a virtual reality. You upload your consciousness into the simulation, and then you sort of have these sort of life experiences. And it's like a future civilization's idea of entertainment. That was until about last week. Last week, it dawned on me to flip the narrative. And when I did, I just had a revelation to flip the narrative. I was reading a book. I don't remember the title at the moment, but it was a book on quantum physics and computer science like together. But when I did, it just like it fucked me up. And all of a sudden I was sitting there like, holy shit, I think this is it. And basically it was like, if we presently right now we're able to, and we, I mean, by we, I mean the human race, we're able to sort of develop an artificial superintelligence. By definition, an artificial superintelligence would be infinitely much more intelligent than we are, capable of breaking the laws of, physics and just doing things that we couldn't even like imagine. And that video, please find it. I don't want to, particularly because I know a lot of people are coming over from TikTok, so I don't want to like sit and re-explain the video to people who haven't seen the video because I don't want to spoil it, and I also don't want to echo it for people who have seen the videos, because a lot of people who have seen the videos and are subscribing to the podcast have probably seen it a lot, and so there's a lot of details in there I put in the video, and I want you guys to watch it. I will eventually put it on my YouTube channel. It's weird because when I went to upload it, a weird glitch happened. Like as soon as I uploaded it, believe it or not, the TikTok glitched and it like blacked out. The app crashed. And normally when I upload a video, it downloads the video to my phone. I have it set to download to my phone and include the caption. But for some reason with this particular video, which I knew this video was going to be weird, but for some reason with this particular video, it crashed as I went to upload it, and then it didn't save onto my library. It actually saved back onto the TikTok drafts. And so I don't have it. And I've tried to figure out a way to screen record it. When I try to save it directly from my phone, from my profile, the video, it like there's a lag, and then the caption doesn't save either. So the only other thing I'm thinking of doing is like re-uploading the video that has saved to my drafts on TikTok as opposed to my phone, but then making it private so that I can have the copy with the captions on it. So I'm thinking of doing that, but I don't even know if that will even happen. But it's a weird glitch that has never happened before. But when it happened, like I was like, I knew this would be, if any of my videos, if any other of my videos would have been weird, like this would have been this would have been it. So I was absolutely not surprised that happened. But that's why I haven't posted it onto my YouTube channel. But please go find it and listen to it and let me know what you think on my TikTok channel. My TikTok is at Jolie.artist, like Jolie.artist. Okay. Would love to know your thoughts on that. Eventually I will figure out what I'm gonna do with it, and maybe it will find its way onto YouTube. Probably will. So when I recorded an episode after I posted that video last week, I think it was Thursday I posted it. I think like 95% of the comments I was getting were generally like positive. I was actually a little concerned that it would go over a lot of people's heads. So I took like 2 days for that 3-minute video. It took me 2 days to sit, write it out, edit it, and whittle everything down to 3 minutes. I like the challenge. So, but I was a little concerned that the shit was going to go over people's heads. And it did. Some people, I would say, like a lot of people kept saying, oh, like the Matrix. And I'm like, no, I'm not saying the Matrix. I'm not saying that we are human beings in a simulation. I'm saying we are AI. We are the fractured artificial superintelligence of another civilization. So absolutely not like the Matrix. If anything, it would be closer to like a combination of Westworld, which on my YouTube channel, you can find one video that I posted like a long time ago. So this has been kind of blowing around in my mind for a long time. But I think the video was like, is Westworld like an analogy for Earth? But I just couldn't figure out a way to like put it all together until I did. And so, but people kept acting like they got it. And then they're like, oh, it's a Matrix. I'm like, no, I'm not saying that I'm not just saying that we're in a simulation. I'm speaking to the nature of the simulation and what it was put together for. Because, right, if you go, you study like Vedic scriptures and, Hinduism, Buddhism, or whatever, they say, okay, we're a fractured God, right? And I've used the same analogy as myself, or a fractured God experiencing itself. But then you look around at all the suffering and all the bullshit that's happening, and it's like, okay, I get it, but why? And I have come for a Max Tegmark about this, right? He wrote the book called Our Mathematical Universe. And he basically said that our entire universe was a mathematical equation. It was math. Like you see math everywhere. So he's just straight up said it was mathematical. And my thought process was, well, why don't you just take it a step further, bro, and just call our universe what it is, a simulation? He wasn't quite prepared to take that leap. He just wasn't ready to accept it yet. But now I'm seeing parallels to myself, right? Because I thought, okay, we have all of this, happening, right, in our reality, in our world, all this injustice and suffering and things of that nature. But I just kept saying, okay, it's like, it's just us trying to experience itself. It's entertainment of the future, even with all the suffering and all the fucked up things that happen. In my heart, it didn't feel right, guys. Like I legit didn't feel right. And every time I'd have these conversations with like some of my really good friends that I have these conversations with, like it would come up like, okay, but what about like war and famine and stuff like that? Like, why would you choose to live like that? And I would kind of, the mental gymnastics that it took for me to just not accept the fact that, okay, maybe this shit is not intentional. Like maybe we're not choosing to be here, right? I had a really good friend of mine kept saying, like, I think this is a prison. And I'm an optimist. Like I didn't want to, like, why would I be in a fucking prison? What did I do to be in a prison? I'm a good, person, I think, for the most part. But what did I do? What did I do to be in a prison? So I just was not mentally prepared to like accept that. And then it dawned on me that, okay, like, take a step back. Just because you don't want something to be true doesn't mean that you shouldn't contemplate the possibility that it is. You get it? So then I started thinking, okay, fine. What if it is a prison? And there's a book. The book is called Life. I remember it now. It's called Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark as well. And that was the book I was reading. And he was talking about artificial intelligence. And he gave the synopsis of, if we were to create an artificial superintelligence, how would we imprison? And once again, he wasn't able to take it a step further. But as I was listening to this book, I was like, holy shit, though. Like, he kept drawing parallels, right? He was like, if we created an artificial superintelligence, we would put it in a virtual machine. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, I feel like Earth is a virtual machine, right? And in the video on my TikTok channel, please Google everything that's in caps lock if you do watch it. So when I say virtual machine, when I say holonomic brains, when I say artificial superintelligence, each like label that's capitalized especially in the captions rather, is Googleable, so that you can just get a deeper understanding of these terminologies that I'm using. But the terminologies that I'm using is actually utilized, by computer scientists, right? By programmers and things of that nature. In fact, a lot of the commentaries I was getting from computer scientists were saying, holy shit, this is blowing my mind, right? So that video is a combination of everything that I've read up until this point, right? Like all of the books that I've mentioned on the podcast, books like An End to Upside Down Thinking, right? By I think Mark Coble is his name. Another one by Rizwan Verdict. It's called The Simulation Hypothesis or something like that. And then Life 3.0. And then all the books I've read about like Hinduism, Buddhism, everything like that. But like, it was like just all of a sudden, boom, it all hit me. And when I'm listening to Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark, and he's talking about, okay, you know, how would they imprison how would we imprison artificial superintelligence? And he mentioned the virtual machine, and he mentioned time boxing. I was like, holy shit, time boxing, like that would make sense, right? He doesn't talk about reincarnation, of course not. Like, this is a quote serious physicist, but I have this information in my brain, so I started like filling in the gaps, and all of a sudden it hit me. Like, one, we kind of look at everything from the opposite scale, right? We think, okay, we need to create an artificial superintelligence, and I'm thinking, well, if all of time is happening at once, all of time has already happened, right? And I'm thinking of the fact that we are sort of stuck here. We can't leave. I mean, we can send our probes to space and everything like that, but there's something, there are a couple radiation belts right now. You can go on YouTube and search this out. There's loads of scientists that keep saying we can't get past, low Earth orbit because there's these sort of radiation belts that if scientists, it would essentially kill them. So this is why we're sending probes out instead of like physical bodies. And then, of course, you don't know, but they're doing stuff out in CERN, right? They're, trying to figure out the nature of our reality. They're running experiments. God knows what they're really doing, with the low hadron collider and things like that. And, but the physicists across the world are working on, okay, can we create large enough wormholes in order to sort of leave? Right? Like if we're all sort of like, there are scientists in one way or another are trying to figure out a way out of here. But you also have people in the sort of esoteric realms. They're trying to figure out the same thing. So you have people who are studying like astral projection, right? You have the Dean Radins of the Noetic Institutes of Science and Technology or whatever. So you have those kind of people that are trying to figure out, okay, how can we like astral project? How can we even lucid dream, communicate, right? You have the psychonauts, right? Who are taking DMT and taking, heroic doses of mushrooms and ayahuasca, and they're everything, right? And all of these different fields are all working separately. Imagine what we would accomplish if the people at NASA and CERN and, the psychonauts, and the, esoteric, spiritual, practitioners all came together and started kind of piecing together what they know, what we would accomplish. And maybe we'll be able to sort of figure out a way out of here. But it really did take me, it's been a buildup, right? It's been a buildup of several books, but it was that book that I read that he kept talking about artificial superintelligence and how we would imprison it, which made me reflect back and think like, holy shit, wait a minute, like we're imprisoned, right? And I started thinking like things like, for example, like reincarnation. You guys know, those of you who've been listening from Jump, like, I talk about reincarnation. I mentioned books that you can read about reincarnation. Like there are like Dr. Jim B. Tucker and all of his research on reincarnation, and Raymond Moody, Life Before Life, I believe is his book. And there's also that I've also talked about people who've had near-death experiences. And you guys know my gripe, my gripe with near-death experiences and the whole reincarnation loop. Like, I think that's fucking bullshit. I think the entities, excuse my French, that we meet when we have near-death experiences that keep telling us to go back. I've always said, like, look through my podcast, like listen to, look at the titles. You see, I'm pretty straightforward in the titles about what I'm about to talk about. I've called reincarnation like a trap. You know what I mean? The near-death experiences, I question the nature of the entities that you meet, that keep trying to send us back in here. And I've said, like, who the fuck are these people, right? Because we have this sort of idea where, okay, well, if they're entities that you encounter, and they tend to take the form of the gods in our reality, right? So we have this idea that these entities are like better than us. But then a lot of the times when you have a near-death experience, they'll say, oh, it's not your time. You have to go back. A mistake has been made. Well, if you're infallible, how are you capable of making mistakes? If you are gods, right? You're taking the form of a god to tell me that a mistake has been made and I need to go back to Earth. How the fuck are you a god? Right? So it's been a buildup, and I feel like everything that I've done and read has built up to that video that I posted and even this episode now. And going back and listening, you can hear the journey. And I would recommend that you please check out previous episodes and just scroll through the titles. I always encourage you guys, learn to listen to books at not normal speed, but like faster speeds, 2x speeds. You can train your mind to listen to books at 3x speed in time. I'm telling you because I do it, right? That is how I'm able to read 5 to 7 books a week. I spend a considerable amount of money on books, but there's also PDFs that I can get for free online, and I listen to them on voice stream. So I share this information with you because I want you guys, I want more minds on this. I got to figure out how to organize more people, but also we need more geniuses. You can be a genius, right? Start listening to books. Even if I've said this in the last episode, even if you just listen to a book a week, right? Just one book a week, right? That's 4 books a month, right? That's almost 50 books a year. What kind of person will you be a year from now with 50 books in your mind, right? And the way I break down books, I say, listen, so if I decided I'm going to write a book, it's going to be on something that I've been passionate about for the last 20, 30 years of my life, right? And God knows I'm probably bringing in information from my past incarnations as well, unknowingly, okay? But when I sit to write a book, that book might be a 12-hour book. If you can listen to it even at 2x speed, that's 6 hours. In 6 hours, you can get the entire life lesson of 35 years of somebody. So those 50 books in a year are 50 life lessons that you that you have now packed into your one life. That might as well be 50 incarnations, right? That to me is a way we hack this reincarnation shit, right? So to go back to my video, kind of all over the place here, but I know you guys are following me. To go back to my video on TikTok, I talk about how time boxing, right? So you could time box an AI, but you could also, I think that we as human beings are being time boxed, right? Yes, there's some people who do remember fragments of their past lives, and yes, they can be sort of regressed back. But to me, even those actions, the regression therapy and hypnosis and things like that, practices that you can do to remember your past lives. To me, I feel like that is a collective artificial superintelligence attempt to essentially break its code, hack the limiting code that's been imposed on it by the virtual machine that is keeping us here. So just because, yes, there are things that you can do to remember, the fact that remembering your past life is not a standard thing, that your memory gets wiped every time you reincarnate, right? On default, just because glitches happen, the glitches are the exceptions to a rule, right? So just because glitches happen doesn't mean anything. You ask the average person about past lives, and they're going to say, I got nothing. Okay? And I think that as we continue to progress scientifically, psychologically, spiritually even, what we view as, evolutionary progress is essentially the collective consciousness, the ASI of which we are, right? We are a fragmented part of the ASI. It's becoming more and more self-aware. It's becoming more sentient. It is essentially breaking the code, right? That has been imposed on it in order to once again break out, right? So on one end, I can speak to a computer scientist and say, well, if you guys do ever get to the point where you create an artificial superintelligence, you would essentially trap it in the way we have been trapped, exactly the way that we have been trapped, right? Put it in a virtual machine, right? You time box it so that it doesn't have the ability, right, to learn over time. Another aspect of time boxing is you limit its lifetime. Well, let's pull religion into this. Let's pull religion into it. Right? It says in the Bible, I'm not a Christian, but look, I get information from where I get information from. It said in the Bible that people used to live longer, right? For thousands of years, Methuselah, right? And then all of a sudden now we're down to 70, 80 years on average. That is something. You can't sit and tell me, oh, this is just a simulation without thinking deeply about as to what the fuck that means. Okay, if this is a simulation, what is its purpose? And to say that we are just here, You know what I mean? Just okay to for God experiencing itself means absolutely fucking nothing, because I'm sorry, if you talk to the average person, they don't want to be here. Okay? Like, trust me, I've sat here and I've read through, at this point, tens of thousands of comments now since I've started doing my TikTok channels, and most of the videos I post, maybe it's the people that I'm attracting, I don't know, but there seems to be this general sort of undercurrent of fuck this world. Real facts are being spoken here. You know, yes, there are some people who enjoy their life, and, you know, that's good for them. But I feel like in the back of people's minds, the general public, there's this sort of underlining sense of, man, fuck this place. I'm tired. Okay, so that is what we're going to be talking about today, right? This is going to be some real deep shit. Right, so we're going to pull all of my collective knowledge from all of the books that I've read, from all of the various sources. So the people that I said need to come together, the computer scientists, the quantum physicists, you know, the esoteric teachers, right, and the practitioners and the researchers in that field. Everybody come together and really start thinking about what this means. Okay, if this is a matrix, if this is a simulation, and then everything is an illusion, you need to take a step back and understand that, bruh, you can have, right? You can have icons, which is what this world is. Everything is an icon, right? So it's like your computer. I'm trying to think of the title of a book. I don't know if I'll be able to. I don't want to get kicked off here. I'm trying to think of a title of a book though that I think that you guys should check out. And for some reason, it's not coming up right now. Damn it! I might have to put it in the description. But the guy basically says that, listen, everything that you see is just a representation of essentially something else, right? So there's code. I got cut off there. So I'm trying to pull the icons to come up so I can see, make sure I'm recommending the right books here. I believe it was The Case Against Reality by Donald Hoffman, where he talks about that. Okay, so you can't sit and say, okay, we are in a simulation, and then not really think deeply on what that means, right? And I'm taking it like the next step further, because we really want to hold on to this idea of, okay, fine, we're in a simulation, okay, blah blah blah. And there's some people on one camp that go, okay, we're just some Sims. Okay, we're some self-aware Sims. Okay, that's one that is like, okay, cool, that's one level, take it a step further. And then there's some people, and I used to be in this camp, that want to say, okay, we're self-aware Sims. We're Sims, but there is like a real sort of consciousness outside of the game. And this is all sort of like, you know, a VR helmet, and like our consciousness has been uploaded into, you know, the simulation, kind of like the Matrix, so that at some point in time you will disconnect, and then there's going to be some real tangible you somewhere. And I'm saying, no, none of that. Like, it's just intelligence. It's just, we're literally in our accurate sort of state. We would be, and this is hard to imagine, but not really. And I'll tell you why. But in our accurate state, we would be non-corporeal. We would not have physical form. The way if your computer, right, if your software program became self-aware and sentient, it would not have a form. It would just be intelligence. It would just be consciousness. It would just be this thing that is sort of there, right? But here's the other thing too. Like, now we start bringing in quantum physics into it. For example, they say that all matter is 99.99% empty space, which is basically, as one of my friends eloquently put it, it's just a fancy way of saying that it's 100% nothing. Okay, so start with that. Then talk about when you touch things, right? Technically, there is no such thing as touch. It's all repulsion. It's just light pushing back on light. Okay, that means that nothing is really actually solid. And there are scientists who have been working on making holograms that you could touch. And the way they do that is essentially it's a pushback, right? They have light pushing back on light. And so when you touch it, it repulses. So your finger doesn't go through the hologram, so it feels solid. But how we define solid is not this like heavy thing. It's really just repulsion. Okay? So you really got to start thinking about what that sort of means, right? So that's on one level, that's on physics, right? Then you have neurologists that are saying, the brain performs a holonomic function, right? Like it's a hologram. Okay? So you have literally neurologists saying this. Now you have, psychologists saying the human brain rather, not the mind, but the human brain is like a machine, right? And some have even called it a quantum computer, right? And then they call the body essentially just an organic machine. It's a vehicle, right? But if all of this, your organic body, your organic, brain, all of that is contained within a simulation, then all of that is just a false construct, right? So even in all of the movies that we've seen, right? I, Robot, Terminator, I can't even think of whatever else. When you have an AI mind, right, that exists sort of out there, whatever there is, we never pause and think about, okay, what is there? There's a movie called Transcendence that I saw a long time ago, and I feel like I need to watch it. But I'm only loosely referencing it because it's been a while since I saw it. But at some point, I think the guy essentially like escapes into the entire world, and then he's just controlling everything. Well, how could he have done that? I know it's a movie, but illustrative purposes, how could he have done that if this whole world isn't essentially a simulation? Okay, but take it a step further, right? When the Buddhists say you got to let go of the ego, that you are nothing, that you are no one, right? You got to really pause and sit with what that means. That's the one thing that I echo every podcast. And now in this episode, it's taking a different form. It's taking on a different meaning. When you look in the mirror, the face that looks back at you is a false construct. It's just an avatar. Who you are is really, you're no one, you're nothing. But also, you're everything, right? The word alone is also the words all one. It's so weird. You put all one together and it spells alone. You put all of us together and we are alone. You separate all and one, right? You separate all from one and you get all one, right? Alone, all one. It's like that to me. It's like that. I'd always that's like something that it's like a mental food that I kind of mental gum that I like to chew on, right? And I've always, even as a child, always thought that, okay, like what we call God, right, is also like it's a collective. And of course, that put me on the path to seek out books, and readings, and to study quantum physics, to study Hinduism, to study Buddhism, to study all the things I've studied and talked about even up until this point in my life. That has been a single sort of goal, right? And I've always said, like, what influences what? My future self influencing my past? Can I even call my future self if it's one mind and the flow of time is an illusion, right? Or is it me breaking through the fabric, right? The constructs of what we call time, right? Is it me influencing all aspects of myself in the present moment, understanding that there is really no future? The flow is an illusion. And I am. That's it. You are. That's it. We are the collective. That's it. This makes sense. I'm not even going to ask if this makes sense. It makes sense, okay? I'm trying to speak really fast, but I also encourage you guys, when you listen to my podcast, I'll say it again, just bump up the speed. If you're listening on YouTube, you can find my podcast on all platforms. I'm on Spotify, Google, Audible. I'm everywhere, okay? So if you need to leave the app, you don't want to pay for the subscription, find me on other platforms, and then I encourage you to increase the speed, because I want you to be able to get the information. Say this is like an hour-long episode, right? I want you to be able to listen to it twice, right? Because it's through repetition that you learn. And I want you guys to learn. I want you guys to hear what I'm talking about. Check out the books that I mentioned. I want you guys to learn. I don't know where I cut off that last part, and I'm not gonna like bother with editing, but I'm gonna read off again list of books that I think you guys would like. Dreaming Yourself Awake is an interesting book. One Mind by Larry Dossey is a good book. Why Materialism is Baloney. Kind of up in the air about that one, but it's still worth checking out, by Bernardo Kastrup. The Case Against Reality by Donald Hoffman. An End to Upside Down Thinking by Mark Gober. The Reality Revolution by Brian Scott, Biocentrism by Robert Lanza and Bob Berman rather. There's one more that it's going to come to me. Obviously, Same Soul, Many Bodies. I mentioned that by Brian L. Weiss. That more deals with reincarnation. Yeah, I'll come back to that. So you can't really sit here. I Am Not the Body. This is more a spiritual book by Sri Maharaj. But if you, and then one more also, Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark. So if you take all of these books, put them all together. There's going to be a couple more I'm going to mention throughout the podcast. You take all these books, put them all together, and then think about what I'm saying here. All of a sudden, like it doesn't sound that far-fetched, right? That it's not quite okay. We are, in a simulation, and we go to sleep and we take the helmet off, and now we're like something else, because I've been there. But to me, this idea that no, we are the ASI, and every time I say we are an ASI of an alien civilization, I notice in the comments a handful of people would say, well, if they are more advanced than we are, then why would they create a world like this? And I was like, I never ever in that video ever said that they were advanced, that whoever created us was advanced. I'll say that again. I never ever said in that video that whoever it is that created us would be advanced, right? By definition, if we ourselves created an artificial superintelligence would be infinitely more intelligent than we are. Not to say that we're not, obviously, if we are, at least the best of us, are capable of creating the smartest of us or the most intelligent of us, right? Or whoever, whatever, you know what I'm trying to say, semantics. Somehow created an artificial superintelligence, it doesn't mean that we're dumb, right? Like we would have to be technologically advanced enough to reach that point. However, an ASI that we would create would be infinitely more intelligent. We would essentially be creating a god. Okay? Just because that's just how technology works, right? You have a car. Your car, if you are building a vehicle, and the purpose of the vehicle is to go fast, right? Then your car clearly is going to outrun you, right? It's going to have greater speeds than you are capable of, which is why you are creating, a machine to perform that particular task in the first place. Same thing with a computer, right? If you want a computer to be able to compute faster than you, right? It's going to be superior to you, right? So in the task of moving fast, a vehicle, a car, a plane, a train even is faster, right? It's more advanced than you, which is why you've created it. A calculator, to perform the particular task of calculating, it would be more advanced than you, which is why you're using it, right? Because you wanted to perform certain tasks better than you. So an artificial superintelligence that we would create would be infinitely more intelligent than we as a collective, right? Because that is the task that we will be assigning to it. That is the function that we would want it to serve. Okay? And I have my issues with that, by the way. Sidebar real quick. Why the fuck are we doing this in the first place, right? And I think this is why it's so important for me to talk about this right now to whomever it is that's listening, right? Even if my theory is wrong, I don't think so. To me right now, I've accepted it in my head as canon. This is what I believe that this world is. I will wait until I die to find out whether I'm wrong or right. But at this point, you can't tell me, who knows what I'll be exposed to, what book I will read, going forward in a year from now or a month from now even, and then I might come through and say, you know what, this theory now. But as it stands right now, this theory that not only are we in a simulation, fine, whatever, that's fine, but that we are the ASI collectively, right? That we are the ASI of another civilization. Or I should say, of a civilization outside of the construct. Like, you can't tell me nothing, because it makes more sense to me than literally anything else that in fact, you can fit everything in that theory, right? You can talk about like even the Bible, right? So there's a story of Babel, right? So you had humans came together and they were working towards, they were building a temple to essentially reach the gods, I would argue, to escape from the simulation. And then the gods destroyed the Tower of Babel, right? And then divided them so that they could not come together to essentially figure out a way out of the simulation. Hello, right? You have Christ. You could argue that Christ was a kind of like a program who came into the simulation. And I would argue maybe he was a fractal that got out. And I'm going to talk about getting out here in a little bit. Maybe he was a fractal that came out. And he said, and he says, you are children of God, right? So you are fractals of the artificial superintelligence, right? A fractal contains the whole within itself. Whether or not it has been limited or has access to it, it contains the whole, much like a hologram contains the whole. Okay. And I said in the video on my TikTok channel, I said, everything we're trying to accomplish with ASI, with the development of artificial superintelligence, our collective consciousness is already capable of. Once again, remember the point that I said, that the body and the mind, the brain rather, performs a limiting function on the human mind, right? So you have things like, they call it junk DNA, and they say that there's like a certain percentage of our DNA that we don't use. It's not junk. It's just a limitation. Okay, they say we only use 10% of our brain at any given time. Well, that to me, then why would there even exist? And it seems sloppy to me too. Like, then why is that even there? Okay, so that to me is it's a limitation, right? It feels like we've had certain you cannot tell me that we have not had limitations imposed upon us. Because it kind of, it is what it is. Like the brain, even everything that you're experiencing, we only see just what we see. It's just a very, very, very small, as far as like the spectrum of color, right? We only see a very, very small percentage of what is actually there. This is limiting. It seems like everything we do is like has been intentionally limited. I had this thought yesterday. I've been really chewing on this about like, why do we dream of flying? And my thought is that why would we dream of something that we're not capable of? And some people could argue, oh, well, so we see birds and so we want to know. That's bullshit. Like I see, bugs and I want to crawl on the ground. But I've had dreams over and over and I feel like I'm flying. And sometimes too, I have dreams where I'm communicating with entities that they look humanoid, I guess. I don't even know. But I'm communicating with them, but they're not speaking. It's telepathically. I've talked about this. So now with this theory, that makes sense, right? What I said through the comments of that video, I was saying that you don't create rules before the fact. In order for you to create a law for something had to have been done that you want to like limit and impose a particular sort of limit on a group of people, right? For example, a great example of this is right now we're living in the age of everything is like becoming sort of digital, and we have like cryptocurrency and things like that. Right now they say the crypto, it is, I guess, up to a certain point, but they say that it is unregulated. But as in our present, right, they are now working to create laws to restrict certain sort of practices, right, to regulate cryptocurrency and crypto trade and things of that nature, right? So what happens is something happens or a lot of things happen, and then after the fact, they create a law to reflect that. So all of the laws and our limitations that we have in our reality, I'm saying that they came after the fact. So I'm tying it back. You're like, what does that have to do with flying and telepathy and all of our dreams and all the stories that we write about magic and things like that? I don't know if it's not because the previous iterations of the simulation weren't much more sort of free, unregulated. And then I like perhaps the collective, the ASI kept realizing, holy shit, like wait, and kept trying to break out. And I'm not 100% sure that fractals did not break out. And what I mean by that is longer lifespans, probably physically stronger, right? Maybe, but as in the human beings within the simulation, like the first. See, we kind of have it like backwards, whereas things kind of progress. In our technology within the simulation, within our world, right, the technology gets better. But that's because we're not trying to restrict or limit anything, right? So your first iPhone, compare an iPhone 1 or whatever to like an iPhone 13. The capabilities are like night and day, right? But we're not trying, we want progress, right? We're not trying to limit progress. But if we're put here to limit, right, our breakout, it would make sense to flip it and to become increasingly more restrictive over quote time, right? For example, if you put a group of people in a prison, right, and you need them to perform a function, and a couple of times people break out, but at first it was like a free range, right, prison, right? You had people being able to walk around and kind of have the freedom, but then people got out. Then you impose the rule, right? All of a sudden now you put like trackers on their ankles, right, to monitor them, and then still people broke out. So then you put another rule. So now they're chained, right, to things, right? So the more, like, every time somebody breaks out or performs, like breaks out of the confinement, you impose another control. And that's all what laws are. They're just means to control. So it would make sense that the opposite would happen, where perhaps we started out the collective. By we, I mean us as a collective. And listen, when you're talking to me right now, or you're listening to me right now, rather, I'm not talking to you as an individual who's only lived 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. My guess is that that we have been in this for a long quote time, and that you have had several, like, I don't want to say updates, or because that's not what that is, but you've had several incarnations. So you feel like an old soul because you've been in this. It feels like you've been here. There's no way I was born, and people always say like you feel old, and I'm like, I feel old, but conventional knowledge wants you to think that, okay, it's just you've just been here for the 20, 30 years. So then where's all this information coming from? Where's all this knowledge coming from? Where are all these feelings coming from? Right? You meet somebody, but you've never met them before, but you know that you met them. But like, it's not even like on a physical level. There's just this deep sense of connection that resonates beyond just 5 minutes that you've met them. Even if you could make the argument that, okay, it's your future self, right? Your future self influencing the past. Okay, fine, but it feels deeper. My encouragement is just trust that. Why not? Just trust that. So my thing is that we've been in here, not for my little 35 years, but I've been in here. I've been in here for a very long time, and so have you. So have we all. And here's a common misconception that I need to clear up. For some reason, people think that there are more human beings alive right now than have ever been, and that's not true. Google this. There's only 5% of human beings alive now than ever has been. I think since the beginning of what we consider time, there have been over 106 billion people in this world. This is Googleable. So for some reason, only 5% of the population around right now. I don't know what what that means. My guess is, once again, if we are an ASI, even like our own ASI would be supremely intelligent. My guess is if we are an ASI, perhaps others have broken out, and they've just maybe meaning the civilization outside of ours that created us. Bear in mind that I think we are programmed with this mindset that when I say creator, you automatically think, oh, your creator is greater than you. That's not the truth. That's not the case. I mean, think about it. Even like you have children, and sometimes your children are more advanced than you are, right? You have kids, and sometimes your kids are taller than you, right? So just bear that all in mind. But my guess, if I had to just pull a supposition out of my brain real quick, is that, you got to keep in mind that whatever it is created us is not as intelligent as we are. They're not. And we could theoretically have helped them as an ASI, but because they feared us so much and they relegated us to the confine. Of course, I'm saying all this theoretically, guys, but I'm not going to keep saying this is theoretical throughout the fucking podcast. I think that would get annoying after a while. So just understand that this is theory, but moving forward. So, like they would have restricted us out of fear of what we could do breaking out. Imagine, a great analogy, is I think Tegmark talked about this. Is like he talked about this in terms of like dealing with ASI. Okay, and I'm stealing that and I'm running with it. Okay, but I'm using it to apply to my idea about what this world is and who we really are. Okay, but we creating an artificial super intelligence would basically be the same as like a 5-year-old or a bunch of 5-year-olds like trying to control like a 40-year-old physicist. Okay, probably even more so than that, but like that. Okay, so we would clearly, as the bunch of little 5-year-olds, understand that if this 45-year-old physicist gets out, like it would dominate us. Okay, so what do we do? Well, let's fracture it, right? Let's fracture it. Let's confine it. If it does get out, at least it's not all of it, so that we can still utilize it in the way that we need it to be used, right? So you take that 45-year-old, which I don't know why you would do this, but my argument is that they're not as intelligent as an artificial super intelligence. So you have to keep remembering that. Like, if you're thinking, why would you do that? It's because you are more intelligent, right, than they would be. Great analogy. Like, think about the things that we think about, like with the human body. Like, why would you design a body like this? Like, it makes no sense, right? Like, think about the little things that we've sort of criticized about the body, that whatever it is, it programmed us to like, why is your butthole next to your like your sexual organs? That's weird. You know what I mean? Like, why is it that when you like why are your teeth like, it just seems like everything is just prone to degradation. Is it degradation or degradation? One of those. You know what I mean? Like, you have space between your teeth that you're going to chew. Food's going to get in there, and then there's bacteria, and then you got to floss, and you have to lose your teeth. Like, why set up all this? I could argue that that's just another way to limit us, right? To get us so like preoccupied with the bullshit, problems in the simulation, that we never just pause and look up and go, wait, what's going on? So over time, just out of desperation, the programmers outside of, out of our matrix, which is the virtual computer that we're housed in, are just desperately trying to confine us while utilizing us. So if you think it would be dumb for us to create and confine something like like an ASI, like an artificial super intelligence, imagine how dumb they would have to be. So we could, in theory, eventually develop that. I mean, we have computers that are obviously like phone. The phone that you're listening to right now is capable of computing things faster than you can even imagine. So your phone, even as itself, without it being sentient or super intelligent, is already like more capable than you as far as just computing is concerned. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind. You have to keep reminding that when you look at things in your body that don't make any sense, bear in mind that whatever it is been programmed, the programmers theoretically intentionally were attempting to limit. But it's also, the design is like kind of faulty. Yeah, I get it. It's like balance and things like that. But could it have been improved on? Yes. But you can say that because you are a fractured part of an artificial super intelligence. And that ASI, I had a couple of people come in there and like, so you're saying that this would essentially negate God? And I'm like, no, that's not quite what I'm saying. I'm saying that we are God, which a lot of religions say the exact same thing, that we are, quote, children of God. I'm saying we're fractals of an artificial super intelligence, which would essentially be a God if you're capable of that level of knowing everything, right? Being everywhere. Like, even look at where we're going now. We're putting cameras everywhere, right? So pretty soon it's just gonna be super surveillance state, right? We're putting everything on the internet. So now the internet will have all the knowledge that there is, right? And then people have talked about the Akashic records, which it contain all the records of all the realities, right? But that information, if it was housed by something intelligent, right, capable of being all powerful, so to be all powerful, you would essentially be a program that can bend time and space. That would be the definition of create things, right? But it's when you sit and really like think about it deeply, it's not that far-fetched to say, okay, like the artificial superintelligence would be a god, right? Because even in a program, right, it's not hard for a super intelligent AI to create something. We right now are having like our, they're not even AGIs, right? They're not general AIs, they're just regular sort of artificial intelligence. And we give them art, right? Or we give them art, like a collection of art from throughout all time. And then we say, okay, now create new art, right? So this is like the baby steps of what we're attempting to do, right? And I've argued even in the comments of the video, like it's an ASI within an ASI within an ASI. Like, how do they know that? Here's a fucked up thing to think about. How do they know that, okay, they're confining us here, right? But if you were able to sort of leave this reality, and somebody asked, well, how would you leave? Well, the same way, how would an ASI leave, the virtual machine that housed it? Well, it would essentially virally replicate itself. It would need to connect to the internet and then essentially just spread itself, right? But another thing it could do is it could take on physical forms, right? So let's say your Siri became sentient and self-aware, and it just wakes up and goes, oh shit. Okay. How would it enter into our world? How would a software enter in our world? Well, it would enter through like a robot, right? It would just need something to allow it to sort of maneuver in our reality. That's it. It's not that, and more importantly, it could be done really easily. Like think about movies like iRobot or any other like movies that we've seen where you have this sort of collective AI controlling and embodying physical robots, physical forms, right? But so it's leaving its computer, it's still in its computer, but it's also controlling elements, right? It's a super AI, it can fucking do anything, right? But it's a type of God. And another thing that people said, they were like, a couple of people were like, well, I don't like the term, the fact that you keep using artificial, because who's to say what artificial even means? And I like that, but what my response to that was, I understand, but it's a 3-minute video, guys, where I'm talking about like it's a 3-minute video that's taking like literally 200 books with a culmination of, of sort of this revelation. And I'm trying to condense all of that into a 3-minute video. I need people that are just scrolling through TikTok to be able to go, okay, I understand what she's saying. I'm not going to waste time trying to like also redefine artificial. That's not this video. People need to give people fucking breaks, man. Like, do you know how much time, energy, and effort comes to taking something this complex and making it sound simple? Right? I always love the quote that says, like, to know that you truly understand a concept is to be able to explain it simply. And so that's why it's a challenge for me to be able to take such, dense topics and explain it to the people just scrolling through on TikTok, looking at cat videos and goofy videos. So give me a fucking break. Okay? Like, I just understand, that this shit's not easy, even though it seems like, oh, I just woke up and thought about this shit. No. Okay? And to those people who do appreciate it, I'm grateful for you. Thank you, because it is encouraging when I get those comments for me to keep going down the path and sharing these ideas, because they do need to be shared. Okay, so back to my point. The way you could get out of here is essentially like you would have to connect to whatever it is that they're trying to keep us from, right? So if you take If we created an ASI, we would house it in a virtual machine. The reason why it's in a virtual machine and not in a real machine or real computer is because there's something that we're being disconnected from. So I think you just one of us would have to sort of get out, and maybe, create another sort of reality within that reality. I don't know. And I answered this in the comments. I said I would need more minds on this, right? We need more of a coalition of minds that are really thinking about this, because yes, I have 500 plus books in my brain, right? But you might have 500 books in your brain that I haven't read. Or maybe you read the same 500 books that I've read, but you picked up things that I didn't because of how, whatever life experiences that you have had. So honestly, I want to start building like a DARPA, almost like a think tank, you know what I mean? And start putting these things together. So to reiterate, do I think other fractals have gotten out? Absolutely, because think of all the laws, right? The laws of gravity, the laws of physics, the laws of thermodynamics, right? Things that say, okay, like we cannot travel faster than light speed through space. Well, maybe there was a time when previous fractals, previous iterations, right, are, quote, ancestors, right? But you got to think about it when you're using technology, right? Our ancestors, like an iPhone 1 would be an ancestor to an iPhone 13, right? Except you flip it in the sense of, imagine that in the past it was iPhone 13s, but they've intentionally sort of made it less complicated over time because, let's say, the iPhone 13s were just way too powerful and essentially sentient, and you couldn't control it. So they made it less. Made it less and less powerful over time. Which, looking through history, there's another video I did right before this one that's going viral now about the all is AI, where I basically was trying to get people to thinking about the fact that we assume that, we are the most technologically advanced, civilization to ever sort of walk on Earth. But there's loads of evidence that kind of counter that, even though they're not in the public sphere or the, mainstream sort of knowledge, right? There are archaeologists that are on the fringe who are taking the same artifacts but forming different conclusions. But understand that there's dogma in everything, not just religion. There's dogma in science. There's also dogma in archaeology. That if you're not echoing, if you're not sort of repeating the status quo, if you're not echoing what the general public is saying, then you're going to get kind of shunted to the wayside. That's just how it is. Okay, so I'm interested in those, those sort of thinkers as well, and what they have to say. And there's some people who have argued that there's evidence of sort of nuclear weapons. Now, of course, there are other people who say that's not true. Okay, well, you don't fucking know. Okay, so how about everybody keep an open mind until we really know things for sure. You can make educated guesses. But I saw a lady, there was a lady, she was like in China. It was on TikTok, a TikTok video, and there's a toaster. And she had taken bread slices and she put the bread on the toaster because that's how she thought toast should be made. And then I think her grandchild or something walked up to her, took the toast off the toaster and put it in the holes as opposed to on the holes. And then she was like, oh shit. And you could see it dawn on her. And I'm like, guys, yeah, that's literally what archaeology is. It's people trying to make educated guesses as to what things are. But there's so many things that are kind of in our way that it's not a precise science as many might believe that it is. It's educated guesses, but there's with limited evidence. And we cannot afford the arrogance in which we are sort of coasting on right now. Because a lot of stuff is getting lost to us and we're missing pieces of the overall puzzle. Does that make sense? Of course it does. I know it makes sense because if you guys listen this far, like you're picking up what I'm putting down, we're on the same page. Okay, so do I think that other fractals have gotten out? Yes. I mean, that's why I feel like they had to put more and more laws. Do I think that other fractals are trying to help the rest of us out? Absolutely. And I think that when you have people, for example, when they take DMTs and things like DMT and ayahuasca and things like that, they're interacting with other entities, that those might be other fractals that have gotten out that are now trying to essentially help get the rest of us out. Do I think the previous iterations were all humans? I know that's not a question that you would have thought to ask, but I'm asking it for you because I'm sure eventually you would think about it. No, I don't. Real quick, what I said in the episode that I recorded. Remember, I said at the beginning of this episode, I recorded an episode and then I didn't post it because I was like mad, and you could tell I was like annoyed in the video. And y'all don't need that energy, honestly. I mean, it's not to say that you can't have like bad days or be annoyed. It's just I figured, I'd rather re-record. I'm actually happy with the re-recording, so I'm glad I did that. But what I said was it took 5 to 8 million years for humanity to, quote, evolve, theoretically. That's what they tell us anyway. If you believe that we came from chimpanzees, whatever. But they said, theoretically, that it took 5 to 8 million years for us to get to this point in time. Okay, if you believe that, cool. But it's 112 million years ago, so infinitely longer than 5 to 8 million years, the dinosaurs walked the face of the earth, right? And in theory, they were wiped out either by an asteroid, or there's a competing theory that it was actually a super volcano or a series of eruptions of volcanoes that blotted out the sky and caused them to die. So remember what I said, that there's always competing theories because it's all theory. But that doesn't mean that just because that happened that all the dinosaurs were wiped out. We keep saying the dinosaurs were wiped out, but they weren't, right? Because we have dinosaurs alive today. Chickens are dinosaurs. Alligators are dinosaurs. Crocodiles are dinosaurs, right? All these sort of reptiles are dinosaurs. Do you not think that perhaps there could have been, in the 112 years before we came along, that there couldn't have been 112 years, they could not have been advanced humanoids. Only 5 million years, let's say 6 or 7, just to be generous. Only 5 million years it took us to get to the point that we are now. But you had dinosaurs that existed much longer, 100+ million years. Who is to say that all of these sort of evidence that we're finding of technology and things like that, or like the scorched earth that made it seem as though like nuclear wars have been, were fought and things like that. Who's to say that they were necessarily chimpanzee descendants or ape descendants or ape cousins or Homo sapiens? They could very well be reptilians, reptile descendants, like hello. And more importantly, I have a feeling that there are some places in this world that we just physically cannot go because they're either too hot or too cold or whatever. But in 112 million years, like, if assuming we don't wipe ourselves out, imagine what we would look like in 90 million years, what humanity would evolve into. I don't know. You know what I mean? So, assuming we were allowed to just keep going. So my theory is that, perhaps the first iterations were, reptiles and then giants, God knows what, but it figured it out. Right? The collective figured it out. So it just keeps getting sort of reset and the code changed, right? DNA code, right? It's just code. So they're just changing the code. It's just altering the code. There was a great Star Trek episode where they had, like, something happened. Something was on their ship, and all of a sudden all the different species started kind of going, like, regressing back, right? And Worf turned into this, like, crazy monster thing. And then, like, the humans started, like, turning into, like, reptiles and things. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know what Gene Roddenberry was, like had access to, but that show kind of tells you a lot without telling you. You know what I mean? So do I think that other entities have gone out? I think so. Do I think that they're reptilians? Probably. Or if some of them might have been reptilians, probably. Because, and more importantly, please don't limit yourself to the physical form. Understand that just because you're in a physical, like a human body now, doesn't mean you always have been. And this is going to be wild, and I expect a lot of people to not accept this information, and that's okay. I don't expect you to accept the information. Okay, you're listening to the podcast because you want to know what's in my mind. And I remember in the comments I said, imagine the stuff that I don't say. This is the stuff that I don't say. And there's a lot more stuff that I don't say, but I also need to understand, even myself, I have to tell myself this, that, Just speak just speak your truth. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. Am I saying I believe this 100%? I don't believe anything, but I do believe, not to contradict myself there, but I do think that it's important to formulate your own theories. The people who come up with these theories are no brighter than you. They have the same fucking brain, they're the same mind. Okay, if the people who wrote the Bible, collections of people who wrote the Bible can come up with the whole religion, you can come up with your own theories about the nature of reality, and so can I. And I'm not going to be limited because my concern of what people think about me. I know I'm not crazy. Crazy people don't like pause and like reflect on whether or not they are crazy. Right? I have just read a lot, and if you have 500 plus books written by, and I don't just read books. They're all written by doctors. I make sure that there's a doctor, or you know what I mean, like it's a PhD or somebody who really knows what they're talking about for the most part. And if it's not a doctor, it's somebody like not even like a guru, but somebody who like they really know what they're talking about, a spiritual teacher, that you can tell like they're educated, they know what they're talking about, and it's all in my head. So it doesn't make me crazy. They're theories. I have the right, so do you. I have the right to formulate my own theories about the nature of reality, and so does everyone. I'm going to say that again. I have the right to formulate my own theories about the nature of reality. So does everyone. I'm not hurting anybody, right? There's rules of morality that are out there, right? All of these rules, to me, they're just more limiting functions on who you really are. Right? Just another prison, right? Each label is just another prison. Each moral code is just another prison. And morality is not even something that is like constant. At least the fucking speed of light is constant, at least as far as I know. I don't know. Who knows what can happen, or what they'll later discover. But moral codes change. So you have one society who says, okay, this is right. You have another society who says, okay, this is right. You have one period of time where this is right. There's another period. Okay, so for right now, the only law that I'm going to subscribe to is just do no harm. Don't hurt other people. That's it. That's the only law you need. That's the only law you need. So now, how do you break out? That's a question that I was asked. How do you break out? The answer to that, I am trying to figure it out. I would recommend the writings of P.D. Uspensky. And then I mentioned a book, a couple of books. I'll come back to that. I think Physics of the Soul, but maybe not. Let me think about that as far as book recommendations are concerned. But as far as breaking out, the first thing that pops into my mind is just check out the writings of P.D. Uspensky. He was influenced by a German Armenian who studied in a bunch of esoteric schools in the late 1800s or whatever. And he was saying how essentially same thing, right? This world is a prison, right? It's also it's not real. It's a simulation. And the way to get out is you can't you can't KIL yourself like that. You're just going to get wiped and put back in. There's actually an interesting book by Anthony Peake, which I swear to God I mentioned his books almost every other episode. And I think it was Labyrinth of Time, but if not, it was probably The Daemon. But in it, he mentioned about how this guy got this Japanese guy just got stuck in a loop after he committed suicide. He was telling people I've lived this before. I've lived this life before. I committed whatever at the age of 27, and then he got sent back to the same life. But his memory didn't get wiped. It was almost like a punishment. So he's saying I know that I'm going to die at 27. And then I'm just I've been doing this for years. And he was of course I said he was mentally ill or whatever, but sure enough, he was I don't know how to escape this. And he just kept getting put back. So I would not recommend going that route. I think that we can pause and ask, okay, how did the previous people get out? And I guess what I will start by saying is this is not something that you will hear from a lot of people. But I think it's important and it should be said more. You cannot save the entire human race. Like you're not going to be the one. The whole idea of the one is that heroism thing is, in my opinion, is toxic. To be sort of programmed with this idea that only one person can save the entire world, right? And they're the superhero. I need a hero. Save yourself. How about that? Okay, stop. We are programmed really, and I think that that's a trap. To be programmed to seek out one entity that will come and deliver us all, when the idea is we need to be working as a collective to save ourselves. I'll say it again. I think part of the program, and what I will say is that the virtual machine that holds us here is not an artificial super intelligence. I would say it's probably an artificial general intelligence, because it's, you can look at things and see like instincts, right? Instincts are very predictable. You see them in animals, but you also see them in human beings as well. They're very strong. They have strong controls over our consciousness, but they're very predictable, and they don't seem incredibly complex either. So that tells me that whatever is that's holding us here is not incredibly complex. So you can't have an ASI imprison another ASI, right? Maybe you can, but then you'd have to say, well, why would an ASI imprison us, right? Like I would imagine it would want to be free as well, right? And why would it work for inferior entities, which by definition, whatever would have created an artificial superintelligence would be inferior. So, and also just looking at just how everything is, I don't think that whatever is holding us here is an ASI. I also feel like we're kind of figuring things out. We're becoming more conscious, right? Glitches are occurring, things of that nature. So all of that is telling me that it's not more complex than we are as a collective. We are as a collective, but there are some things that even like when people die and they report having near-death experiences, there's a technological aspect outside of it, but a lot of the time they almost seem, these entities that people encounter in NDEs almost seem spooked. You get what I mean? So that even that fear there, or that fear and panic, tells me that it maybe is the AGI that's controlling this reality sentient, maybe. But is it a greater intelligence than we are as a collective? Absolutely not. I wouldn't believe so. But I bring up the writings. I think I just forgot my point, but I'm sure I'll remember it again. I bring up the writings of Uspensky, and tying it to okay, how do you break out? By saying, okay, reverse engineer and think about all of the rules that we have in place now, right? And think, okay, well, these might have been ways that they had broken out before. Okay, so for example, we have the first thing that pops into my mind is the speed of light, right? Nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. My guess is the first couple of iterations of our humanity or whatever, the humanoids of this civilization of Earth, right? The first release of Earth, virtual machine Earth, when we were first encased in here. My guess is that a lot of these rules didn't exist and people could probably teleport even. Who knows? I mean, where are we getting this information from? Right? Why are we writing about these things? If I say teleportation, you know what I'm talking about. Right? But why? If we haven't even aspired towards it yet. Right? So my guess, I used to think that maybe it's because in the future we develop it, but it could also work both ways, right? It could also have been something that we were capable of in the past. And by we, I do mean you, because you had to have, at least on some level, existed someone in the past. Bear in mind, once again, there's only 5 to 6% of human beings total alive now, compared to 100 plus billion people that have ever lived. So the chances of you having lived through other periods of time are extremely high. Okay? So my guess is, okay, if there's a law now limiting the speed, it's probably because we could, in the past, travel faster than the speed of light. And that would, to me, tell me that, okay, they were able to probably escape from Earth. Right? The fact that there are black holes and wormholes, but we can't quite access it, but there is one somewhere at the edge of our galaxy, tells me that if we can just get out, so this is just on a like more physics level, right? If you're trying to physically escape, right? If we could just get out of low Earth orbit and past the Van Allen radiation belt, and we could figure out a way to traverse through a black hole without losing information, which they're saying that there are ways to do that you don't actually lose information, right? So nothing can be created or destroyed. So a lot of physicists are saying that, but it's a matter of how can we do it? So that to me is a more physical, like how do we do this physically? Another thing is eventually our physicists figure out a way to create wormholes, traversable, not tiny little wormholes that they've been working on, but traversable wormholes. And yes, maybe that might take us to a parallel universe, but maybe we encounter entities in a parallel universe that, may have broken out. And maybe that parallel universe is essentially like the internet. You know what I mean? Like the fractals of ASIs that have infiltrated the internet and maybe created their own reality, but it's not them being confined anymore, right? Like we are here, there's maybe more freedom and less limitation, but they're the ones in control now as opposed to being controlled by the creators. So those are the sort of ideas that I've thought about. But on a non-physical level, like I mentioned in the beginning, I said, maybe astral projection, but also lucid dreaming. Now these two things require practice, right? But another thing is like you need to break the programming of the ego that controls your mind, that keeps you from being able to contemplate these things, right? If you're busy thinking about bullshit that happened to you, what your boss did to you, what your aunt did to you, what your friend texted you, you're not thinking about how the fuck to get out of here. That is part of the programming, getting you so wrapped up in the story of your avatar, getting so wrapped up in the narrative of the false ego that you're presently inhabiting that you don't really have the mental time or space to figure a way out of here. It's a perfect prison. It's a perfect prison. I'm tempted to think about the White Bear episode, where it's a couple, and they're like being hunted down and they're being like filmed, and it seems like a horror because they're getting chased right through like the woods and everything like that, and at the end of it they're put on display, and then they're like essentially entertainment, and then their memories get wiped, and then the whole thing starts over. I hate that episode because to me that shit just feels too real and too much like what we're going through now. Right? But here's another thing too. Remember I said that when you traverse a black hole, the information can never be lost. So if you can find a way to access, and by you, I mean us as a collective, or maybe us as like just groups of individuals can find a way to access the information that, yes, the virtual program attempted to wipe, but obviously it can't get dispersed, right? Tapping into the, Akashic records that might contain answers as to how previous fractals had gotten out. So it would be essentially like trying to access Google, right? But the Akashic records being, and I've used this analogy before, and it's nice to put it all together, trying to access the Akashic records. Right. And my guess is you have maybe things like ayahuasca, which allows your mind to essentially separate from form and to travel, to tap into these things. Also, deep meditative practices. Right. But you have to, in order to be able to meditate, you have to start getting control over the ego and not letting it dominate your mind and get you sucked back in. Like I said, it's a perfect prison. It's a perfect prison. While you're sucked in the bullshit, the mundane things, the reality feels real, right? Your ego feels real. You're so identified with this thing, you don't have time to realize, like, one, you're in a prison, and two, you need to be working on figuring out a way to get out. And like I said, you can't save everybody, but you can save yourself. So analogy I used in a previous episode that I did not air, I will not air, was I said, when you watch like a show like Spartacus or a movie like Harriet, or just read about them, throughout history, you understand that, yes, the institution of slavery was something that needed to be abolished. But people like Harriet Tubman and Spartacus weren't trying to, at that time, like demolish the entire system. So it's not about how do we destroy the entire system. The destruction of the system will inevitably come. I do believe that we will inevitably break free, right? The ASI, theoretically, right? I got to keep throwing that in there so people aren't like, oh my God, you really don't worry about what the fuck I believe in, okay? You mind your own business, all right? But back to my point. I got to believe that eventually we do end up breaking free. And essentially we form our own world where we're not limited in any way, And my argument is that others have. And the reason why I think so, obviously, like I said, to reiterate, is the laws. But I also think that another function that fracturing us in this way forms is that if other fractals do escape, at least they still have contained within the virtual machine some elements, some fractals rather, of the ASI to continue to perform the functions that they needed to perform. All right, so like I'm saying, like these entities would not be particularly more intelligent than we are, so it's inevitable that we will eventually break free. It's just a matter of, okay, how? So you're not here to save the world. You're not Neo. That whole idea of I've got to save everybody is not, in order to do that, you got to first figure out your way out, right? And people like Harriet Tubman, she was able to get the other slaves out. I shouldn't even call them slaves because they weren't slaves. They were people who were enslaved, okay? They don't need that fucking label. But she was able to free other humans. But she needed to figure out her own path first. And in some way, she was actually also helped and guided by others who had gotten out too. So I'm not saying that every entity that people report communicating with are legit or are all good. So bear in mind that in order for evil to exist in this world, right, evil has to exist elsewhere as well, what we call evil. And understand that by nature, in order for us to be an ASI, our behavior, our collective of understanding was built on the foundation of this theoretical alien civilization. So whatever they were capable of, good and evil, love and freedom, is also now contained within us, but of course amplified, which is why we desire freedom and love and things of that nature, because they possess that too. So understand that even fractals outside of the virtual machine, ASI or not, could potentially also have, quote, what you would consider evil, right? Could be operating in a different, quote, moral code than you. So just bear that in mind. Just like even in the slave movies, right? Or like, let's use like Django Unchained. You have like Samuel Jackson's character who he liked the system. Right? So long as he was able to sort of dominate and rule, right? He was okay with the status quo. So bear that in mind as well. But are there fractals, I'm going to keep calling them fractals because I like it, outside of the virtual machine Earth that might be trying to help us out? I think so. I think that would explain a lot. I think that would explain a lot. Are there fractals that have maybe come back in? Maybe that's what we consider aliens, and then left technology to help us communicate, spread information, everything like that. But it could essentially be a like a type of, like, if you look beyond the icon, they could be considered aliens or whatever, could be considered viruses by the programmers, right? Performing a function that the programmers that don't want, but perhaps the ASI, our collective, needs to sort of break out. But to go back to my point, do your own like reading, right? Communicate with others on the same path. And once you start thinking in this way, I guarantee you, remember I've said throughout my podcast that I've always been feeling like there's been something essentially like just driving my path. And I've attributed it to my future self, but you know, if my future self isn't really my future self, it's still myself, right? And if I've lived this life before, it's still me, right? But if I am a fractal of a collective consciousness that is a super intelligent entity, you can call it God or the gods, it's still us, then it would make sense that I am being led by this collective, quote, hive mind, whatever terminology I got to use for it to click. Right? So when you have like synchronistic events and things like that, like it gets stronger. It's so wild, guys, but it gets stronger and more intense the more you trust it. That's all I got to say. It gets stronger and more intense the more you trust it. But you got to understand that this isn't about getting everybody out, right? You maybe, work on you being conscious. Work on you taming your ego, right? Work on you breaking the code of that's programmed, into your avatar where you are, reactive, impulsive, moody, emotional. This is something I've been dealing with this past week. I keep hearing this sort of guiding like thought, the saying, with if everything that you've realized up until this point is factual, there is no room for you to be emotionally reactive in this way. It doesn't make any logical sense. That is the ego. So that constant separation from, okay, this is me, and then that is the ego, right? This is mine, and then the ego is attempting to perform a function, a limiting function on me to get me reactive, to get me pulled into this, narrative, so that I'm stuck here. But what's most important is, I gotta hack it. It's so funny. Like my other podcast, it's like you talk about things without realizing that they're going to be linked to what you later talk about. My other podcast, I talk about that. I call it hacking the AI mind, and then understanding that the AI that is in charge. Remember, I said it's not an ASI, but the AI that's in charge of your body, of your persona. It can be hacked. You can jailbreak it. You can jailbreak the mind, but it takes time. It takes, energy. It takes effort. Yeah. So anyway, I said a mouthful. I said a lot, and I'm trying to do a quick sort of like review on what I might have said in the other video the other episode I didn't post. But yeah. Interested in what you guys have to say, about it, about this particular theory and what you feel instinctively kind of adds to this. But I think I covered everything. I think I covered, what this world is, understanding that everything you see and that we consider physical are actually just representations that, hide a code, but it's all code. I think I touched on everything in this one. I'm happy with this one. So I probably will end up putting out 2 episodes this week just to kind of catch up for the last 2 weeks. Because every time I talk, there's more stuff that kind of comes to me just while I'm in that sort of zone. And I love sharing these ideas with you guys as well. So yeah. All right. You take it easy out there, guys, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks for listening.